I'm Emil Moffitt, reporter and host of WABE TechCast in Atlanta. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. This is a debate among Republican candidates for state school superintendent. Let's meet the candidates for this debate. They are, in alphabetical order, John Barge, an educator and former state school superintendent for Georgia, and Richard Woods is the incumbent state school superintendent for Georgia. Now let's meet our panelists. Crystal Dixon is a reporter at Axios Atlanta, and Ty Tagami covers education for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. For complete rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by one of the panelists, and candidates have 60 seconds to answer each question. Crystal Dixon, you get the first question to Richard Woods.
Superintendent Woods, thank you for being here. Governor Kemp last week signed legislation banning what he calls divisive concepts for being taught in public schools. What is your take on this legislation, and how do you think this bill will affect teachers as well as students?
Well, I'm pleased to work with Governor Kemp and the legislature to help, craft this legislation. For myself, being a former teacher and especially teaching social studies and history, I looked at the bill and the content and said, could I, feel uncomfortable as a teacher to use this legislation as a guide, and I did not. I think one of the things we needed to look at is putting a process in place to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I think it protects teachers and gives them a guide and make sure that we're all on the same page. I think for us, it is looking at what is our primary role, and that is to make sure that we're, making sure our kids can read, write, do arithmetic, become good citizens, but more importantly, have the skill set for a great career. And as we continue to look at this, we're going to make sure that the legislation is well monitored, that we're doing our job, but we're protecting our kids and making our focus on educating them and giving them great opportunities as they move forward.
Ty Tagami, it's your turn to ask a question to John Barge.
Thank you for being here, sir. You were state superintendent before. You chose not to run for re-election in 2014, so I'm wondering what made you decide you wanted to come back?
Well, there are a lot of things. Ultimately, the major decision factor for me came in my grandchildren. My grandchildren are beginning school this fall. The oldest begins kindergarten. He started preschool this past fall. And my daughter made a decision to put them in private school. And she made that decision based on a lot of the issues that are going on in public education today. She does not feel that she can send her children to school and that they are safe, that they will be educated, that they will not be indoctrinated into a lot of the left woke agenda that is coming through our schools. Dealings with gender identity issues, the critical race theory issues, and then looking at just basic student outcomes at this point. Our fourth grade reading and math scores are the lowest they've been in 15 years. Our eighth grade reading and math scores are the lowest they've been in 8 years. So we are not headed in the right direction. We've lost a lot of ground from the time that I was state superintendent. And I want to make sure that all parents in this state, not just the ones who can afford private school,
Mr. Barge,
but all parents can send their child to a quality school.
Thank you very much. That concludes the first round of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to an opponent of their choice. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds for the response, and then the candidate who asked the question will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, John Barge, you may ask the first question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Woods, I've heard you report on the success of career pathways and the increase in graduation rates in Georgia. Since I developed Career Pathways back in 2004, I appreciate you recognizing the policies of my administration have been very successful. My administration also removed the Georgia high school graduation test, which stood as a major barrier to graduation. That being said, can you point to a single initiative you have implemented in 8 years that has helped improve student achievement in Georgia? And if so, cite the evidence.
Well, I think one of the things we look at is making sure that our kids could have an education that expands beyond everyone going to a college. Again, celebrating whether it's technical college or looking at the military or straight into the workforce. One of the things we look at as far as what is our measure, we had the highest graduation rate in our state's history. So again, our teachers are doing a great job catching our kids up. Also, as we move forward, we're looking at beating the ACT and SAT scores. But I think when you look at the pathways that, again, you develop, one of the things I inherited was that there was a takeover attempt by the governor and the technical school to remove, our pathway or CTA program from us as a department. And so things were perhaps not as rosy as they seem as you were going out. And when you look at, that's something you quote, quality counts. Well, you talk about Georgia being 7th, but as you were leaving office, Georgia ranked 38th.
All right, Mr. Barge, 30 seconds to respond, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Woods. Well, just as a point of clarity, I think that you affirmed my question. The only initiative that you have that you are campaigning on is the success of career pathways. I didn't hear any other initiative or any other data that supports increases in student achievement. So thank you very much.
All right, and Richard Woods, you have the next question.
Okay, during your term as office, or at least at what point in your term as you were superintendent, did you decide to run for governor of the state of Georgia?
Well, we've talked about that over and over and over again. That seems to be something that you can't seem to let go. But, there are reasons behind that, and Governor Deal and I have mended our fences. Governor Deal actually supports me in this election. So it was clear to me that there were issues that needed to be addressed for education, and that was the best way that I saw at the time to deal with those issues. But again, that being said, Governor Deal and I are on good terms, and
Mr. Woods, 30 seconds if you'd like.
Okay. Sure. As we look at this is a tough job. And it's a job in which I committed that I made sure that I was going to stay in it and run and accomplish the things that I promised that I said I was going to do. In doing so, I addressed, the issues surrounding Common Core. We were eliminating those standards. We had the largest reduction of state-mandated testing in our state's history. Again, something that my opponent initiated, in which he says he removed tests, but actually we were about to step into a process in which every single child was going to be tested in the state of Georgia. And also we've expanded pathways, and again, making sure that our kids are on task, STEM, STEAM, expanding fine arts across the state. And again, we did not even have an individual in fine arts in over 25 years until I stepped into office. So you have to make sure that as a leader, you're going to stay the fight, because leaders find a way to win.
All right. Thank you very much. That concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is the debate between Republican candidates for state school superintendent. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. And as a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions of the candidates, and I'll determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Tai Tagami, you get the first question in this round.
Superintendent Woods, nice to see you here today. You said that graduation rates are the highest they've ever been, and they have been rising. However, 16% of students, more than 16%, still aren't graduating on time. That's about 21,000 kids, and I'm wondering what you are doing about that, and what are you doing for those who are already adults and didn't get their degree?
Well, one of the things we look at doing is expanding pathways. That's something that I think that we need to make sure. As I was coming into office, we assumed that every single child was going to a 4-year university. Well, that's not the reality of life. So as we continue to make sure that we expand those opportunities, we need to, change our graduation pathway, formula for what that looks like. Not every child needs to take the same 4 math, 4 science, and social studies, but we do need to align with the passion that they have, whether that is looking at a path in the military, straight into the workforce, dual enrollment. Those are things that are important for our young people. Working with our earliest of grades, I think one of the things we have to be is be proactive, continue that focus on early literacy as we move forward. Talking with US Ed, looking at them and especially, special needs. And so we don't need to necessarily get locked into the 4-year pattern, but I think we can do things by expanding and giving us some flexibility for all of our kids throughout the state.
All right, Crystal Dixon, your turn to ask a question.
Mr. Barge, you've campaigned on preventing what you call woke leftists from indoctrinating students. Can you provide any examples of what you've witnessed personally or what you've experienced personally when it comes to this campaign topic?
Absolutely. Going back to my daughter and making the decision to send her children to private school, that came on seeing a school enrollment form come home from the school district that asked for the gender of the child, and it said male, female, or other. And as a parent, she decided she did not want to send her children to school to be indoctrinated into that kind of thinking. We have issues around transgender students and bathroom usage. In 2016, the Office of Civil Rights under the Obama administration sent a letter to every single superintendent in this country that I received as a local superintendent that demanded that we allow boys and girls to use whatever bathroom they choose to use based on whatever gender they identify with. I told my community, my board, that it didn't represent it wasn't law. And we weren't going to do that. But that was not the case in every school district in Georgia. So you have some school districts in Georgia that allow children to do that. You have some school districts that don't. We have a district right now that's being sued by the parents of a 5-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted in her bathroom at school by a boy who claims he's a girl.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ty.
Superintendent Woods, the General Assembly this year passed numerous bills designed, sponsors said, to encourage parent participation engagement. So we have bills that clarify rights to attend school board meetings or access to curriculum, that streamline the book removal, book banning process, and the aforementioned divisive concepts legislation that controls how we discuss race in classrooms. I'm wondering if you think that was the right approach to encourage engagement and what you were doing to encourage more parental involvement, engagement.
Well, definitely so. I think since day one, since stepping into the office, I've always had an open door policy. That meant that I've talked with parents on a regular basis. I've even gone out to personal homes to have conversations with individuals and groups. So, we will continue that. I think looking at the legislation, it was the right balance. It was a time in which we definitely needed to have that transparency. One of the things we have been working on and continue to work on, is making sure that data is available to our parents. I think we have to understand that our parents, that these are their children, that we are just, temporary placeholders or guardians of them, but we have to respect the role of the parents to govern their child's education. And I think, making sure that they clearly understand what is out there, what the expectations are, what the content and materials are. This allows us to be on the same page. It allows us to be focused. And, and it does allow us to build relationships, not only with kids, but also the parents and community at large, because we, as public education, we have to make sure that we continue to earn and maintain the public trust.
All right. Crystal, your question.
Mr. Barge, this question is for you. You've mentioned that you wanted to, overhaul the Department of Education. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean about that?
Certainly. Within my platform, part of my platform is to rebuild the Department of Education. Quite honestly, as a local superintendent for the last 5 years of my career under the current administration, I can tell you that there is not very much leadership that's happening at the state level to provide local school districts with the guidance and the direction and the vision that they need from the state to be successful. So there are very few people within leadership positions at the Department of Education who have any real experience in leadership roles in the positions that they have. I mean, very few of them have been superintendents or even assistant superintendents, and so there are lots of issues there. The current Department of Education has been sued 3 times for whistleblower or hostile work environment lawsuits. Staff has been told not to speak to board members, not to speak to legislators. So it's a pretty toxic, dysfunctional environment that needs to be corrected.
Ty, next question.
Yes, this is a question for Superintendent Woods. This primary season has shown us that we have a split in the Republican Party. And I'm wondering, it's been described as sort of the Trump-David Schaefer wing and then the Jeff Duncan GOP 2.0 wing. And I'm wondering where you fall on that spectrum.
Well, I think for myself, for us as Republicans, and I think if you've been to meetings throughout the state, as I've left every single GOP meeting, at the end, they always talk about whatever happens in this election, we have to come together as a party. And I think we have to focus that. We do have differences, and that's quite all right. You have, two different individuals on stage today that have a difference of opinion. And so, for myself, my focus continues to be on, on this race, to making sure that I'm living up to the promises that I made the people of Georgia. So I'm going to commit to that. But at the end of the day, once we, find out what happens on May 24th, we as Republicans are going to come together and should come together. So that's my commitment, that as we move forward, we're going to support all the Republicans that come out.
All right, Crystal.
This question is actually for both of the candidates. So Governor Kemp signed a bill that would make it easier to remove obscene material from school libraries. First, this is a two-part question. What do you both think of that legislation, and how do you all balance the view by some that children should have access to stories that are different from their backgrounds?
Mr. Barge, you can go first.
So I'm thankful for the legislation. I think that I don't think that we need to approach this from a position of this is banning books. It is more, to me, it is more seen more as making sure that we have age-appropriate material for our children. I don't agree with a lot of the resources that, if it's illegal for an adult to provide some of this material to a child, why is it legal for them to get it from an adult in a school? That does not make sense to me. And so I think the legislation is on target. I wish it would go a step further. I'm not actually very fond of the ability to argue the merit of an entire piece of work to justify sexually molesting a child, or justifying rape, or justifying some of the things that are in these books that we're exposing minors to.
Mr. Woods.
Yeah, well, again, looking at the material, again, I've already, stated my support of the legislation, but, we have to look at what is the end goal, and that's to protect our kids. We want to make sure that it is age appropriate for them, that the content is appropriate for them to view. But I think it's also working with our parents, and as I stated, I think it's extremely important that we recognize their right to govern their child's education, providing options, again, not banning books, unless it goes through the process and says this is really what our community, this is what our schools do not want. We have to have that engagement at all levels, whether that's with parents, with schools, and their boards of education who are elected. So we're committed to make sure that we work through the process. Again, I'm proud to say that we help work with the legislation, but we're going to do what's right to make sure that things are not removed unnecessarily, that there continues to be options. But at the end of the day, what material, if it does need to be moved, should be removed, and we're going to make sure we focus on that.
All right, Ty, your question.
I have a question for both of you, too. I'll start with Dr. Barge. So we have for over a decade, we've had a program that allows taxpayers to contribute to private school tuition. It's a tax credit scholarship program, they call it. They get 100% back on their contribution. It started out at $50 million, like in 2008. This year, it's been growing, and this year the legislature expanded it to $120 million. I'm wondering if you agree with that expansion, and whether you think it should continue to grow, and if so, why?
Well, I'm not necessarily opposed. I think what you're referring to is the Gold Scholarship, and I'm not necessarily opposed to the Gold Scholarship. I'm not necessarily opposed to parents receiving a tax deduction on their credits for money that they contribute to a private school to fund a scholarship for a child. The only thing that I want to make sure that we do is that we are accountable for that money. We are accountable to the taxpayers. We know where that money is going, and at the last that I recall, we didn't know who was receiving the scholarships, how much they were receiving. And so I think that there is an accountability issue that we need to make sure that we are being truthful and honest with taxpayers about where money is going. But I certainly don't have an issue with taxpayers receiving a credit for money that they contribute to a scholarship.
Mr. Woods?
Well, I think as we look at this, as being state school superintendent and over our public education, that continues to be my, primary role. to make sure that constitutionally we are adequately funded. I think that is mandated. I'm very appreciative of the governor and the General Assembly for restoring the austerity cuts. What I firmly believe is what we really need to look at is our funding formula for public education. It is 1985. It is antiquated, and things have changed a lot. I think about when the time that I was a classroom teacher, technology was an overhead projector. We did not have computers. We did not have the number of children we have today, and so I think we have to be focused on that. As the General Assembly determines and we have the proper funding, then we want to support all parts of education. But right now, my focus continues to be on that of public education and make sure that it is fully funded and adequately funded so that we can do the job that we need to do to reach over 90% of the kids of the state.
Crystal, your question?
It's actually also a question for both of you. Speaking of funding, how would you both change the current method of funding when it comes to public education in Georgia? We know that QBE is outdated. It's been in place for nearly, almost 40 years now. So how would you all change the current situation now?
Let's start with you, Mr. Woods, this time.
Well, one of the things I think we need to look at is even how we procure and buy things within the state of Georgia. I think one of the things I've, looked at, and being a former businessman, purchasing agent, I think we can be more effective in looking how we're able to spend tax money and have that flexibility. But also looking at what the needs are. Again, looking at our population in the state of Georgia, we deal with things such as, dyslexia, various forms of special needs. We have a growing population of ELA, even just driving, buses today. You think about the cost of fuel, which can be extremely overburdensome within the state. And again, one of the reasons that, I asked for flexibility with that. So I think it is a combination of working with the General Assembly and the governor to come together, create a great plan, looking at flexibility and looking what needs are. Because, times have changed. Just looking at connectivity and what we had to deal with the pandemic is a clear picture that we need to expand that.
And Mr. Barge.
To actually answer your question, I would address things and shortcomings within the funding formula. I would update things like, the funding formula gives school districts money for textbooks based on 1984 textbook prices because the funding formula has never been updated. To point out an issue that Mr. Woods raised, there is no funding in the funding formula for technology. There are also issues within the parts of the formula, let's say, that cover equalization. So there are school districts who receive equalization funds based on a formula that is flawed. The state will identify the counties and rank them on their wealth, and they'll draw a line at a certain number, 20, 25 counties, and those top counties receive no equalization. Their 5 mil share goes to other counties. The formula doesn't take into consideration that some of those 5 counties or those top counties have land that's owned by the government that they can't receive and generate any tax revenues from, so they are unfairly penalized.
And that is all the time we have. Questions for each candidate. We'll now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Richard Woods, you get the first closing statement.
Well, to the Atlanta Press Club, to our panelists and moderator, and to GPB, I want to thank you again for this time that we've had together. As we look at this, it is a record, that we're looking at of 2 individuals who have held this office. I'm glad to say that I've led with integrity, I've led with dedication, and I've not jumped ship to chase other offices, for whatever reason it may be. But our children need to have someone who is willing to stay in the fight, an individual who has been successful in that, and I think you will find that I have led that way. When I go out and travel, people will look at me and say, Richard, you're not a politician. And I think that says a lot for somebody that's been in the area of politics for 8 years. We have accomplished a lot, and we're going to continue to accomplish a lot, whether that be the removal of Common Core. Next year, every child will take a strong personal finance class, and we will put these laws into effect for the betterment of all of Georgia. So I ask for your vote and your continuing stay in this office. Thank you.
And John Barge, you get the final closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you to the Press Club, and thank you, citizens of Georgia. The Department of Education is in crisis, and we're in a crisis of leadership. Due to lack of leaderships, there are school districts in this state that allow boys to use girls' restrooms. school libraries that allow easy access to obscene materials to groom children for the sex industry, the Department of Education promoting and teaching concepts of critical race theory to teachers. Due to a lack of leadership, we have the 4th grade reading and math scores the lowest in 15 years, the 8th grade reading and math scores the lowest in 8 years, our national ranking in AP exams going from 12th to 15th, the national ranking of overall quality in our state's educational system falling from 7th to 31st. I have 24 years of experience, successful educational leadership experience across this state. My opponent may attack me, he may question my motives, but he can't hide from the facts of his own record. My opponent had about 4 years of leadership experience before his contract was non-renewed. He never worked in public education again until elected state superintendent. Academic outcomes at our state in my 4 years as state superintendent far surpass what he's achieved in 8 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, May 24th, and early voting is underway. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists, Ty Tagami and Crystal Dixon. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information on the debates they will host this election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. I'm Emil Moffitt. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.